to our Wednesday weekly Bible reading study, where we're looking at our lessons for this coming Sunday. And this Sunday we are keeping on with our sermon series, God Is, looking at the attributes of God. We've looked at God as all-knowing, He is loving, God is powerful, all-powerful, and then last week, God is good. Today, we look at the attribute that God is sovereign. God is sovereign. So what is that word? And the lessons that we're going to be reading are 1 Chronicles chapter 29, verses 10 through 13. Then 2 Corinthians 4, verses 13 through 18. And then Matthew 8, familiar story. Jesus calmed in the storm, Matthew 8, 23 to 27. So, when you hear the word sovereign, God is sovereign, what comes to your mind? What does that make you think of?
One.
One, okay. What do you mean by that?
One and only.
Okay. We're going to be singing our, no. Yeah, this weekend we're singing the Come Almighty, where it talks about God being one, the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, but He's only one. Yeah. Okay. What else? God is sovereign.
You mentioned it when you mentioned Matthew calming the sea, sovereign over nature, or ruled over nature.
Okay, rules. Yeah, there's a word. Rules. Sovereign is about kingship and rules and authority, right? The word authority. What other kinds of things come to your mind with the word sovereign?
I was thinking worthy.
Worthy, okay.
Let's see, title.
Yeah.
Deserving.
Deserving. Yeah, okay. So there's that aspect of it. We'll hear that in the Chronicles.
Isn't it after Samuel?
It's after Kings.
Oh, it's after Kings.
Yep.
Yes, I agree.
In our English Bibles. In your Hebrew Bible is the last book. Last book of the Hebrew Bible is Chronicles. Because it was probably the last one written.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to be in 1 Chronicles chapter 29. But let's talk about Chronicles. What do you know about the books of Chronicles? Where they kept records. Okay? Yeah. Chronicles gives that image, right? Records. What else do you know about Chronicles? What were you going to say, Miss Bonnie?
Like the family tree.
Okay, there's a lot of genealogies in there. There's some genealogies, yeah. It's not only that, but there are some of those, yeah. Chronicles, what else? That's okay. So it actually, Chronicles mirrors what we read in 1 Kings and 2 Kings. Okay. So the book of 1 Kings and 2 Kings talks about, obviously, the kingships, right? The kings of Judah and then the kings of Israel, right? And it kind of gives the theological history of God's people from the time of Samuel, or right before Samuel, to the exile, right? The last king, Jehoiachin, who is carted off into exile at the end of the book of 2 Kings, right? And Chronicles mirrors that same time period, but it has a different purpose, okay? In Hebrew Bibles, right, in the Hebrew structure of the Bible, you have three sections. You've got the books of Moses, called the Torah. How many of those are there? 5, very good. The Pentateuch, 5. The books of Moses, the Torah. And then the second part of the Hebrew Bible is called the Netubim, which is the prophets. And it actually starts with the book of Joshua. Right? Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings. Okay? Those 4 or 6 books, if you want, are part of what are called the prophets, the former prophets. They're the theological history from the time of the coming into the promised land with Joshua to the exile. 1200 BC to roughly about 600 year period. Okay? And it's history, but it's theological history. It's not telling you everything that's happened. It's just saying, from the perspective of these writers, this is the theological movement that God has been playing out with these people, Israel, in this land. Okay? Then the other parts of the prophets are the what they call the latter prophets, the three big ones, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, because their length is they're big ones because they're long. And then you have the book of the 12, the minor prophets, from Hosea to Malachi, and there's 12 of them. Okay, those are prophets. Okay, but so are in the Hebrew Bible. So is the books of Judges, Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings. Now, the third part of the Hebrew Bible is called the writings. Okay, the writings, the Ketuvim. And the writings include the stories of Ruth and Esther. It includes Psalms and Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and Job. And then it also includes Daniel and Chronicles. Chronicles are part of the writings. They're not part of the history, because there is no history book. English Bibles will structure Chronicles as part of the historical books. Okay, so they lump it in English translations. They put it right after Kings because it's the same time period, but it's a different purpose. Okay, it's actually in the Hebrew Bible, 1st and 2nd Chronicles are the very last books in the Hebrew Bible, in the Hebrew scrolls, because they were probably the last ones written. Okay? And they considered them not theological history, but more of the wisdom of getting it right. Okay, so when you read the stories of Kings, there's a lot of crappy stuff in it, right? Joshua, Judges, especially the book of Judges, and then the books of Samuel and Kings. There's a lot of bad stuff in it, right? Was David a great guy in the book of Kings? Not always, right? A murderer, an adulterer. Okay, when you read Chronicles, none of that's there. Chronicles is kind of like the Sunday school version of, it's the cleaned up version of it, right? So it's kind of like American history, right? When you're in grade school and you're learning American history, who's the heroes? George Washington, right? You tell the basic stories of Abraham Lincoln. But if you really wanted to do a thorough study of American history, you would dig in and find out, they weren't perfect, pristine people either, were they? They had their faults, they had their shortcomings. And that's kind of what Chronicles is, the Sunday school version, the cleaned up version. Kings is the nitty gritty versions of the history. Okay? That's just it's more complicated than that, just giving you a little overview of what that is. So when you look at the story of Chronicles, you won't hear about David and Bathsheba. You just won't hear about it. He's cleaned up. Right? They don't emphasize the David and Saul 7-year civil war for David to finally become the king over all the people, right? It all happened real nice and easy. Not really, but in Chronicles it does. Okay? Now, when David wants to build God a house, right, a temple, what was God's response? Do you remember? 2 Samuel chapter 7. One of the most important chapters in all the Old Testament.
He didn't want a house.
God doesn't want a house. He lived in a what?
Yeah.
A tent, a tabernacle all these years, right? God says, you're not going to build for me, but your son will, right? One of your sons will build it. David had bloodied himself too much. And God says, not you, David, but your son will build it. Okay? So what Chronicles does, go back to chapter 22. Keep going back to chapter 22. So there's a bunch of chapters leading up to chapter 22 that kind of give you the David story and how David becomes king and the victories that he had and all that kind of stuff. Then you get to chapter 22. And David said, are you looking at it, verse 1, chapter 22? Then David said, the house of the Lord God is to be here, and also the altar of burnt offering for Israel. So from chapters 22 through the end of the book, through chapters 29, it's all now devoted to David getting ready to build the temple. David isn't going to build it because he can't, but in Chronicles, David does all the work to get it ready. So skip down to verse 5. David said, my son Solomon is young and inexperienced, and the house to be built for the Lord should be of great magnificence and fame and splendor in the sight of all the nations. Therefore, I will make preparations for it. So David made extensive preparations before his death. So David can't build it, but Chronicles says David does everything that he can to get it ready, because Solomon's just not up to the task. Okay? So Solomon is going to be the builder, but David is the builder behind the builder. He's getting everything right. And so all these chapters are devoted to David designing the temple, making preparations for it. If you look at chapter 23, David not only did that, but he lined up who should be all the servants. So you've got these genealogies of the Levites and the Kohathites and the Meravites. You get to chapter 24. He's got the divisions of all the priests who are going to be serving. All these names, right? Levites and the singers. He even organized the choir, chapter 25. David put together all the choirs. The gatekeepers, chapter 26. All these names. The treasurers and all the officials, even lining up all the armies, chapters 28.
How come you line them all up if they weren't going to have it yet? I mean, these people might be dead by the time.
Getting it ready. And here's
It's their descendants.
here's probably what's going on with this. So, when the people in the story of Kings, right? The story of Kings, when finally the people go into exile, when God allows the Assyrians and then allows the Babylonians to come and to wipe them out, to take them into exile, they kind of thought about, well, how did this happen? Why did this happen? And the reason why it happened, God told them, was you worshiped other gods in other places. You didn't do the worship thing right. You didn't follow and worship only me. And so what Chronicles is saying is, let's not do that ever again. Let's not get it wrong of how we got to have the right people in the right places at the right time doing this worship thing, so that we never fall into this exile problem again.
So that was his plan with all of this.
That's what the writer is doing, right? So the writer is doing this. The writer is saying, we've got to get it right. David tried to get it right. We didn't follow what David was doing, but now we will. Because this is written after they've come back from the exile. Because like I said, it's probably the last book of the Old Testament actually written. And it's coming back and saying, well, let's not fall into those traps of doing the worship of God in the wrong places with the wrong people. Let's have it one place, Jerusalem, the temple that David got ready to build, but Solomon built it, and all the right players in their positions. The priests doing their job, the singers doing their job, the Levites doing their job, and not making that mistake again. All right, so that's the book of Chronicles in a nutshell. There's more to it than that, but there's a little bit of Chronicles. I guess those builders needed permission from you to do something. They're probably asking you, should they dig a hole this afternoon? Maybe not.
Take care of that.
I thought it got rid of the bush. Excuse me.
That's okay, Miss Bonnie. We'll welcome you back. All right, so now we're actually ready to look at chapter 29. If you look at the beginning of chapter 29, David's got all the things ready, right? He's got all the preparations, all the people in place. But in order to do a building project, what do you got to do?
Hire a builder.
You got to hire a builder, and then also you have to have what for the process?
Materials.
All the supplies and materials, and all of that costs
Money.
It does. All right? And so chapter 29 is telling us all about how David's going to do the fundraising. It's a fundraising chapter. How David's raising the funds for building the temple. Now, all the people, so verses 1 through 9 is all about how David said, here's what I'm bringing. Here's what all the other leaders of our church and our community and our nation, what they're bringing for this. And the people, look at verse 9. The people rejoice at the willing response of their leaders. They had given freely and wholeheartedly to the Lord. David the king also rejoiced greatly. So our text, starting at verse 10, is David's prayer in response to all the joyful, committed giving that God's people were doing for the building of his temple. Okay. All right, so let's take a look. Verse 10 through 13. David praised the Lord in the presence of the whole assembly, saying, Praise be to you, O Lord, God of our father Israel, from everlasting to everlasting. Yours, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the majesty and the splendor, for everything in heaven and earth is yours. Yours, O Lord, is the kingdom. You are exalted as head over all. Wealth and honor come from you. You are the ruler of all things. In your hands are strength and power to exalt and to give strength to all. Now, our God, we give you thanks and praise for your glorious name. All right. So the prayer continues on for a number of verses, but that's where we're going to end our reading for this Sunday. So, remembering our theme, God is sovereign. What do you find in here that echoes some of that theme of God is sovereign?
Everything in heaven and earth is yours.
Everything in heaven and earth is yours. He's above all. Okay, what else?
Everlasting to everlasting.
No beginning, no end.
Is the greatness and the power.
The greatness and the power. Does, I think the ESV use the word sovereign in that reading at all?
I didn't notice it.
Okay.
No, that's it.
I wasn't sure if they used the actual word. Because the idea of God being great and powerful, that's that idea of sovereignty. That's sovereignty right there, right? That he is over everything. Exalted as head over all. So that means who's not?
Satan.
Satan's not. Who else? We aren't. Yeah. There are two fundamental truths that everybody's got to come to grip with sometime in their life. Number one, there is a God. Number two, you ain't it.
Oh, that's right.
But how do we make ourselves, set ourselves up to be like God? Or don't we? Maybe that was just an Adam and Eve thing, not our thing.
We put our own desires before the desires of God. What we want is more important.
Anytime we sin, we set ourselves up as God.
Ourselves up, yeah.
We'll decide what's right. We'll decide what's wrong.
We know better.
We know better. We've got this figured out, God. We don't really need you. Yeah. David did it all the time. Adam and Eve weren't the first. Well, they were the first, but they won't be the last. We wanted to be like God too, didn't we? Right? They saw the fruit and they wanted to be like God. That's what the text says, right? In Genesis 3. She saw the fruit and she wanted it to be like God. So she ate them, because that's what Satan told her would happen. Yeah. Two fundamental truths in life. A, there is a God, and number two, you ate it. But sometimes we don't like that truth. We'd like to think we've got the things figured out. But here's now David, right? At the end of his life, realizing that, no, God is all-powerful. God is sovereign. He's the ruler, not just all-powerful. He's the ruler over all things. Do you know what the term GOAT means? Greatest of all time, right? So there's always the debate on sports stuff. Tom Brady is the GOAT. He's the greatest of all time for football players, right? LeBron James or Michael Jordan, who's the GOAT? Neither of them. I like Larry Bird better. So, no, I don't. So, but everybody has those debates, right? The greatest of all time. How could we put the term GOAT and apply it to God?
It's the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
The greatest. Yeah.
Not of all times, but God over all things. Yeah. He is God over all things. He's the GOAT. He is the one over all things. There isn't anything above God. He's it. He's it. And that's what David is praising God for here. He is exalted. He's head over all. Everything comes from him. He's the ruler of all things. He's the head over all things. He's got strength and power, and he gives that strength to all. We live and we move and have our being through him. Not on our own, but through him. So everything in my life, there's a limit to it, right? My plans have a limit. We like to think that we can plan everything out. No, our plans have limits. How do the people in older days recognize that? There was a phrase that they would often use in their writing and in their conversation. We talked about it last fall when we looked at our Bible study or in our Bible series on the letter of James. I think that was last fall. Or maybe it was the fall before. I can't remember. I'm getting so old. That was 2 years ago. Oh my goodness.
What was the question again?
Yeah. How did people in older days so often talk about how there's a limit to our plans of what we can do? It's a two-word phrase.
God's hands,
Sort of pretty close. God
Yeah.
willing.
God willing.
God willing. That's what
God
James
willing.
said. You can plan to make your business and make money,
But God knows.
but God
God willing.
So when we say God is sovereign, we're saying that I can make all the plans I want, but the best plans of vice and men are often gone astray. Who came up with that line? The best laid plans of mice and men often go astray.
Steinbeck?
John Steinbeck, very good.
Yeah.
Good
I was
call.
going to say John Steinbeck.
Yeah, because he wrote a book called Of Mice,
Mice
and
and
Men,
Men.
didn't he? And that was the whole thing. He used that line. The best laid schemes of mice and men often go astray. But we're doing a literature here too, aren't we? So that's kind of what David is kind of realizing here. That God is a ruler over all things. God is the giver of all things, the head of all things. We can lay out all of our plans, all of our things, and not saying that don't make plans, right? It doesn't say don't be, but in the end, it's God's will. God will. God will.
And back to 28:12.
Yeah. Okay.
He gave him the plans of all that the Spirit had put in his mind for the courts of the temple of the Lord, and all the surrounding rooms for treasuries of the temple of God, and for the treasuries for the dedicated things. And then the note down here, let's see where it is. And David was provided all the plans for Solomon, as Moses was provided all the plans for the ark of the tabernacle.
Yeah. God.
Because Moses couldn't do it.
Well, Moses did build the tabernacle.
Oh,
He did in the wilderness.
Aren't you saying the ark?
Moses built the ark and the tabernacle. That all was described in Exodus, and they actually built it in the wilderness. Yeah. So that Moses did do, but it came from God, right? And that's kind of what the writer, I think, is saying here in your footnote, is that in the same thing with the temple, it all came from God. David designed it, but where did its origin come from? The Spirit of the Lord.
in capital letters.
And
David also gave everything he had here.
David was the primary giver. Yeah. So when this kind of gets used a lot when churches are doing big building campaigns and stuff, right? You always go to your leaders first, right? Your leaders, and you ask them to kind of set the pattern for the giving, for what they're going to set aside for the building of the sanctuary or whatever the big project is in your midst. And then the rest of the people see that and are encouraged by that, right? Seeing how their leaders have stepped forward. And that's what David is advocating here. He comes first, and then he's addressing all the other leaders. And they were great. They were generous. They gave freely and wholeheartedly, right? Verse 9. And so David praises God for that. And uses the language of God being sovereign. Great and powerful with authority. And laying it all out that he's the ruler over all things. And in our world, we think sometimes we are, or at least we see, who thinks that sometimes they're the ones who chart off everything that should be done in history? Political
Our
leaders.
leaders.
Yeah, political leaders, right? No kings. Trump, Putin, before them, Roosevelt, Stalin, Hitler. They're all just what?
Gone.
They're all just gone. They're footnotes.
Dust.
Yeah, they're just footnotes. Kingdoms come, kingdoms go. United States is kind of been a power. Well, what did we just celebrate? Our 250th anniversary. In the time frame of history, that's pretty small. You know? The Roman Empire lasted for 1,000 years. Chinese empires, they lasted before Christ longer than that. Yeah. They're not also significant. Who's the only one that has all authority over all things for all time? God, the Lord. Yahweh. He is the king. He is the sovereign. And we realize that our plans have their limits. Don't they? What we plan has its limits.
Doesn't matter.
Not that we should
Well, you
plan.
have to
Yeah,
think
gotta
about
plan.
the future.
Absolutely. That's not what it's not saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is saying ultimately it's all God's. His plan. His plan, pardon the word, trumps everything. All right. Anybody else on Chronicles chapter 29?
But they were like, it's just an observation.
Yes, ma'am.
When you look at the word sovereign, the end is reign.
It is.
Oh, yeah.
It's a Latin word that means king over all.
Yeah.
Sovereign kind of means king over all. There ain't no king above him.
No.
All right, let's take a look at 2 Corinthians chapter 4. Sovereign is one of those words that I will type it out and I'll spell it wrong the first time. I always forget that E.
Sovereign.
I always forget that first E. I don't know why. Or I misplace it. All right, 2 Corinthians chapter 4. What do we know about 2 Corinthians?
Where's the first word?
There was a 1 Corinthians. We actually think that there was 4.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Some scholars think that there was 4 letters that were actually written to Corinth, but only 2 of them made the cut. Yeah, it got circulated and became scripture. So this is Paul's letter to the Corinthians. Second letter. First letter was rather harsh, right? It was a lot of rebuking, a lot of correcting. Over and over, he has to says, I don't want you to be ignorant, not stupid. I don't want you to be uninformed, right? Ignorant. Over and over on a lot of different math, and that was the first letter. And the people get that letter, and from all accounts, it seems like Paul had to do a letter before this letter, just kind of to smooth things over, or at least say, hey, I'm glad that you're starting to work on this stuff. That's why they think there's another letter, but we don't know for sure. But this letter is more conciliatory now. This letter kind of is...
The first one got their attention.
Yes, and they began to do the corrective things. And now Paul is getting word of that and writes back maybe a follow-up letter from his other letter that we don't have. Could be, we don't know for sure. But this is more conciliatory, and now he's kind of dealing with how do we move forward together in our work together. Okay? And so in chapter 4, what we've got is Paul is talking about how you got treasures in jars of clay. Okay? The treasures that we got in jars of clay, the treasure is the good news of Jesus, right? The treasure is the gospel. That we are saved by grace through faith in Jesus. God is the creator of the world. He's the restorer of the world through Jesus. That's the treasure. But it's in jars of clay jars. What's risky about clay jars? What's risky about jars of clay?
They break.
They break. So when I went to Wisconsin Rapids, and had my installation service there, I asked my friend from Appleton, Dan, from Faith in Appleton, to preach that service. And he told, hey, Emmanuel, you didn't know you're getting a cracked pot for your pastor, did you? And he used this text, jars of clay, right? A cracked pot. We're vulnerable, we're weak, right? Ministers of the gospel aren't perfect. Nobody fainted. Okay, you all knew that. So Paul is kind of realizing that sometimes people look at ministers of the gospel and think, well, of course you're perfect, right? You got a closer, you got more pull with the guy upstairs. How many times have I heard that? Boy, if I had $1 for every time I heard that, I'd be able to have a fishing boat. No, we don't. We are cracked pots, right? We're jars of clay. And that's where Paul is teaching that and reminding of that, so that people realize that the power of their salvation isn't become because of the persuasiveness or the winsomeness or the abilities of the preacher, the minister of the gospel, the servant of the word. It's because of the message, right? The message is what's important, not the person behind it. Okay? And that's kind of what he's dealing with here in chapter 4. And in our verses, we're going to read verses 13 through 18. I'm going to actually start reading at verse 7, but our text for Sunday is starting at verse 13. Okay? And here's what we got. But we have this treasure, the treasure being the gospel, in jars of clay. People, right? To show that this all-surpassing power is from God, not from us. We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed. We're perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed. We always carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. For we who are alive are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that his life may be revealed in our mortal body. So then, death is at work in us, but life is at work in you. So what Paul is saying is, as ministers of the gospel, for these men who were joining him and going out with this mission, it was hard. It was difficult. And he goes, we're giving away and losing so much so that you'll be built up. Right? But it's not us doing it. It's the power of the message that's doing that. And then he wants to talk about the value of suffering. Right? The value of suffering. It is written, I believe, therefore I have spoken. We talked about that last week, or 2 weeks ago. With that same spirit of faith, we also believe and therefore speak. Because we know that the one who raised the Lord Jesus from the dead will also raise us with Jesus and present us with you in his presence. All this for your benefit, so that the grace that is reaching more and more people may cause thanksgiving to overflow to the glory of God. Therefore, we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not what is seen, but what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. Okay, so let's take a look at that with you guys. Any questions, any opinions, comments about how Paul finishes off this theme about treasures in jars of clay?
Well, there's certainly words of hope for people.
How so?
Rick says all this is for your benefit,
Okay.
all the way through.
Yeah.
Don't lose heart.
Don't lose heart. You're going to have hard times. Don't lose
It's
heart.
momentary.
Momentary.
A re-emphasis of being saved by grace.
Yep, there is that. That will always be central to his writings and teachings. Saved by not what you do, but what God gives. And of course, the talk of the resurrection, because the resurrection does what?
Changes everything.
Changes everything. even our sufferings, right? So if God is sovereign, because God's in control, my problems, they got a purpose. When stuff goes wrong in our life, it's not like God lost control. There's going to serve a purpose. How's that true? How have we seen that played out in biblical stories, biblical characters? Our problems have a purpose. We did a whole sermon series on it a couple weeks or a couple years ago during Lent and Easter. Job's problems, right? And Job's couldn't see it at the moment, but he was convinced that God would refine him like gold. God would work everything. God's still in control, Job said. He didn't think God sent it necessarily. Or if he did, he had to repent of that, right? Because here's the thing, God's not the sender of our troubles necessarily, right? He'll allow them, permit them, but he's not always the sender of it. But he does make the promise that he's still in control. And because he's always in control, there's always a purpose to whatever's happening to us. God can turn it and make it, like we said last week, good. Doesn't mean it's good what happened, but God is, because he's in control and sovereign. We'll see that. Who's another person? We didn't do a sermon series on him. He's in the book of Genesis. And the last 12 chapters are devoted to him and his story. And Andrew Lloyd Webber wrote a musical about it. Not Cain and Abel. The last Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, right? Joseph, the favorite son of Jacob, gets the coat. What do his brothers do? Sell him into slavery. Who buys him? This captain of the guards, Potiphar. Who tries to seduce him? Mrs. Potiphar. Yeah. David resists. He knows, no. And she accuses him of assault. He gets thrown into what?
Prison.
But gets out of prison. Becomes the leader, second in command. Helps save the brothers when they finally come down to Egypt looking for food. And after Dad dies, after Jacob dies, all the brothers fear what?
Retaliation.
Joseph now will retaliate. And it's in the last chapter, almost one of the last words, Joseph says, no. I'm not going to retaliate you. What you did was evil, but God meant it for good. Because my problems will always have a purpose. That's what Joseph realized. Right? That's kind of what Paul's saying here too. Right? Where do you see evidence of that language that my problems have a purpose?
16 maybe a little bit.
Yeah, a lot of it.
Yeah, our outer self is wasting away. Our inner self is being renewed day by day.
Yeah. Outwardly, we're losing, it looks like, right? But inwardly, God's making us stronger. For our light, verse 17, and momentary, what? Troubles, problems, are achieving for us an eternal glory that far awaits them all. Because the resurrection changes everything. Paul knows that though all these troubles he's going through and will go through, looks like he's losing, there's a bigger glory in store here. Right? We've got an eternal home that God has prepared for us. And he wants us to get that message out so more people can be part of that eternal home. And that's what all of chapter 5 will be about, or the first 10 verses of chapter 5. But he says, ends it up with then, so we fix our eyes not what is seen, but as what is unseen. Why? Why does he say we're going to fix our eyes on what is unseen, not what's seen?
Because we can't see Jesus.
You can't see Jesus, can't see our eternal home, can't see the end.
The plans that God has for us.
We can't see those things. But you know what? We're going to fix our eyes on what's unseen, because what's unseen is the hope that God has waiting for us. This glory of a new place, a new home, an eternal home, right? And what is seen then is just temporary, but what's unseen is eternal. So the things I'm going through now, temporal. They got an end, right? But what God has in store for me, never going to end, right? Because I'm going to dwell in the house of the forever. You know, and that's what chapter 5 talks about, this heavenly dwelling. We live in a tent now, right? It's going to go, but God's got a building of a house for us, right? He's going to build a place, a permanent place that will never end. What I have now is temporary, but what God has in store for me then, eternal. And so these problems that we face, the troubles that we have, Paul is just teaching us and telling us again, that's temporary. There's a purpose to it. And God, why is there a purpose? It's not because of Hakuna Matata either. Hakuna Matata means what? You guys don't know your Lion King? Hakuna Matata, no worries. It's no worries. That's Hakuna Matata from the Lion King, right? There's no worries. No, that's not what this is. This is God in control. That's why we can have confidence that my problems have a purpose. Not because it all works out in the end, don't worry. Hakuna Matata. Right? It's, no, God's in control. That's why. God is sovereign. All right. Anything else there in this text that you're wondering about, or questions or comments? Wow. All right. Must be teaching good today. Going once?
Well,
Paul.
yes.
Thank you.
18, so we fix our eyes not on what is seen or unseen. And it reminds me of John 14. No, where are you going?
Okay.
How do we know where you're going?
Yeah.
I'm going to build a place for you. Yeah. And that's not seen, but you have to believe it through faith.
It is. Yeah, those I am statements of Jesus. I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, we're going to talk about those in our message. How do we know that God is in control over all things? 7 times in John's Gospel, Jesus says, I am, and there is no other. Do you remember those 7 I ams?
I knew you were going to ask that.
I know. I've done it before.
I am the vine.
I am the way.
I'm the way, too.
Truth.
That's part of the way.
The truth and the life.
That's part. Okay, we still only have 2. Bah, bah.
I'm the good shepherd.
Good shepherd. Okay, good job.
The resurrection.
The resurrection and the life, or sure, I'm getting hungry.
Bread of life.
Bread of life. Good job. Good job.
Good.
2 more. I saw the
Light.
no. There we go. I am the light of the world. We got 1 more, and it's connected to the Good Shepherd one. You need one in every room in order to get out.
Door.
I am the door. Those are the 7. And what Jesus is saying, by the way, he says it too. In Greek, it was lego eimi, not lego my ego. Lego eimi, which means lego is say. I say eimi, I am. I say I am. And it's kind of like I am and there is no other. I am the Good Shepherd. There isn't another one. I am the door. There isn't another door. I am the way, the truth, the life. There's no other way. I am the resurrection. No other resurrection. I'm the bread of the world. I'm the light of the world. There is no other bread, no other light. I'm it. Jesus is claiming authority, sovereignty over all.
Even in the Old Testament, God the Father says about that to Moses. I am the great I am.
Right. That's when Moses says, who should I say sent me? God says, I am who I am. And that's his name. 6,000 times, it's in the Old Testament, the name of God, Yahweh. Right? And in our English Bibles, whenever you see the word Lord, capitalize all 4 letters, that's God's personal name. It's not a title, it's God's personal name, Yahweh. And Jesus is Yahweh. And there is no other. So when you say no way, I say Yahweh. Okay. Very good. Very good. All right. Thank you for that. Anybody else? Corinthians. Let's move over to Matthew chapter 8, a story that we've looked at before. We probably looked at it in Mark's gospel. Well, today, I think we looked at it in Matthew's gospel not too long ago, too. But it fits with this theme of the sovereignty of God. The all-ruler, God over all things. So in Matthew 8, Jesus has finished the Sermon on the Mount, chapters 5 through 7. Crowds are amazed. Jesus moves on from there after doing those teachings and does a couple miracles. Healing a man with leprosy, the faith of the centurion's son, heals all sorts of people. Peter's mother-in-law, and everybody comes to Jesus for healing. Jesus kind of wants to get away from the crowds now and decides to go with his disciples in the boat. So verse 23. Jesus got into the boat and his disciples followed him. Without warning, a furious storm came up on the lake so that the waves swept over the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. Disciples went to him and said, "Lord, save us. We're going to drown." Jesus replied, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then Jesus got up, rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. And the men were amazed, and they asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." A familiar story. So we'll come back to you guys. Any questions, comments, opines? It's pretty easy to see why. John already kind of identified that, why this is something that we chose for our theme, God is sovereign. Why is that, John?
Because he even has over nature.
Yeah, even the winds and the waves obey him. Because God is the goat. He is God over all things, even wind and waves.
I don't know how big the boats were then, but pictures always show they weren't that huge. So there must have been quite a few, all the disciples on there, quite a few people.
Yeah, the archaeologists, I would say a generation ago, when and I got this through Paul Myers, one of Paul Myers' writing some books, when the waters of the Sea of Galilee kind of receded because of a drought, and the shoreline grew bigger and bigger and bigger, they unearthed a boat that was sunken into the sands, and they figured it was from the 1st century. They determined it was about the time of Jesus, 1st century Palestine. And they discovered that, because a lot of people were confused by that. We're picturing a rowboat, right? One of the rowboats that we will fish on the river with. How can you sleep through a storm in that, right? That doesn't make no sense. Well, they discovered that the boat, this fishing boat, actually was like one of the big boats that now they are on the river too, but it has the upper level and it has a lower level. And that the boats of the 1st century Palestine, this is the evidence that we have now from archaeology, were actually 2-level boats. And so the implication is probably Jesus isn't sitting, on a seat getting splashed by water and sleeping right through it. He's on the under part, right? He's on the under part where he's protected from the water coming in and all that kind of stuff. A little bit bigger boat than we imagine from the paintings and the drawings and our own imaginations. It's probably a little bit bigger vessel. Any other questions or thoughts or opines?
It's interesting that the disciples, I would probably react the same way and be frightened.
Yeah.
But they had seen him do the miracles.
Yeah, they've seen him, right? They've seen him do the healings now so far. Massive healings. So he's got power over the demons because he's driven people out. He can just say a word, doesn't have to be near the servant, and he's healed. Right? Yeah. And now Jesus even is kind of critical of him, right? Why do you have no faith? Why were you afraid? Why do you have no faith? Or little faith? I can take care of this. I like the way Mark phrases the story too. When they wake Jesus up, Mark says, they said, "Teacher, don't you care? Don't you care?" And how did Jesus address the waves? How did he address the storm? Rebuke the winds and the waves. It's the very same word that they'll use when Jesus encounters a demon. What will Jesus do? Rebuke them and quiet them. Jesus does the same words when he deals with this storm. He rebukes it and quiets it, which I believe, my good friend Michael Carter wrote a song about this, he suggests that it's a demonic storm. And I think he's right. Demonic storm. I do think he's right. But it's up for debate. And the people are amazed, right? They're amazed. They still don't have the faith, but they're amazed at what Jesus does. Who is he? He's the God over all things, but they don't see it yet. Not yet. Who is this man that even the wind and the waves obey him? Because who only has power over wind and waves? God. And is God in our boat with us right now? The disciples would think at this point, going, "I'm not quite sure who he is." But yeah, God is in our boat with us.
I don't think Jesus would have gotten the boat if he'd known there was a storm. And that's why, because the devil was at work.
I mean,
Because
it's hard to
they
know.
were going,
It's hard to know if Jesus knows. He is all-knowing.
yes,
But as a human,
But
he
he
does
was-
lay it aside.
going to sleep. He was
Yeah.
tired.
He was tired. You're right. Yeah, he was a human.
He was,
Yeah.
Well, they said it was a great storm, so we
It was.
kind of assumed that the
Well,
disciples
yeah.
never
We
seen
might have seen
anything
the
this
clouds.
bad either.
Which is unusual because they were probably on the water all the time. They
Yeah,
probably got
yeah.
caught in some storms before.
yeah.
This one was freaking them out, though, wasn't it? Yeah. It was a great storm, yeah, but it goes to a great calm. Right? Completely calm, but the word is great. There's a great storm, there's a great calm, and Mark also says they had got a great fear, the disciples. And that was Michael Cart's song. A great fear because of whose presence they were in. The Almighty's, and they're not quite sure what to do with him as this Almighty One stands in their boat. By the way, what's the place where you all sit out there in church at worship? You know what that place is technically called? No, the sanctuary is the entire part. Where the pews are, the nave.
Yeah.
What's the Latin word nave?
Boat.
Boat, ship. Yeah. The navy, right? Yeah. The nave is the Latin word for boat or ship. And so the image of where worshipers sit is that you are in the ark, the boat. And who's with you? Jesus. Now, the structure of our particular sanctuary is pretty cool. A lot of them are like that. When you look up at the ceilings, if you would invert our sanctuary, our nave, it looks like the hull of a boat, doesn't it? A ship.
That's what it looks like at the bottom, yeah.
Yeah. When you're sitting down, you look up. You invert it so that the ceiling becomes the bottom of it. It's like you're sitting in a big ship. Done on purpose. Designed that way on purpose. See, even our building is good theology. All right. That's all I got. God is sovereign.
That storm last week,
Yeah.
that was a picture that Ian got at Waverly. Because it was right over them. It was right over them, Waverly.
Yep, it can be scary.
That made me think about this too, the demonic
Yeah.
storm that Jesus and the disciples.
Yeah. And-
It almost seemed like that was.
This one looks demonic,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
So when Jesus lands finally, after the storm, who's the first one to encounter Jesus in both Mark and Matthew?
A demon possessed man.
A demon possessed man. Who's hanging out in the cemeteries in Gentile country?
Yeah. He
Yeah.
probably,
Yeah,
they
it
probably left the water and went right to him.
Or Satan doesn't want him getting there. Yeah, and tries to, and Jesus gets there anyway. Because we know that that man, Jesus heals him, he comes in his right mind, and he wants to go with Jesus, right? Jesus says, no, you can't go with me, but rather go back to your home village and tell everybody what God has done for you. Because he's in Gentile country, not Israel, right? And they all want Jesus to leave because Jesus drove the demons into the pigs, right? So they're freaked out about it. So, but when Jesus comes back to that region, the man did his job. He told everybody about what this man Jesus had done for him. And now when Jesus comes back, a crowd of 4,000 are there to hear him. Yeah. From madman to missionary. There's hope for us all. All right, that's all I got to say about that. God is sovereign.